Hey guys, I just thought I'd share with you the Blue Eyes Felgrand deck that I've been playing a lot recently, just for fun at locals and online. This deck is strictly just a fun deck. I really don't think this deck has any competitive viability. Insert meme about Blue Eyes winning Worlds here, but you're basically just playing a brickier version of Blue Eyes that wants to go second and OTK your opponent with a bunch of really beefy dragons. So yeah, let's get into it. It's pretty standard for the most part, except for like 4 or 5 cards, but we'll get to those when we get to those. First off, 3 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon. He's probably the most iconic monster in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! He's the namesake of the deck, and he's the reason that this deck gets so much support, because it's such a fan favorite card. So, play 3 of it. Same reason for this card, Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon. This card is in sore need of a reprint. But it's basically just a Blue Eyes that special summons itself from your hand. It counts as Blue Eyes on the field or in the grave, and it also is spot removal for monster cards. So that's pretty good. If you can manage to stick multiple copies of Alternative on field, your opponents can have a rough time keeping their monsters on board. So 3 and 3, it's really standard. And then the next Blue Eyes Dragon we play is 2 copies of Dragon Spirit of White. This is also just really standard. It helps bait out set back row, because when he's special summoned, it targets a spell trap card and banishes it. So if your opponent doesn't want to lose it, they will have to respond. So it's really good for baiting out like strike and stuff. So yeah, 2 copies of this. You could probably play this at 1 if you wanted to. I just like having more targets for trading. And you're playing a fun bricky deck anyway, so why not maximize on the sack? We also are playing Desires, so and as I said in my last video, I hate banishing one-ofs off of Desires, so that's all we play too. So that's it for the Blue Eyes monsters, the Blue Eyes Dragons, excuse me. That's all really standard. It's basically just a pure Blue Eyes build. Now, here is the reason we play this deck. We play 2 copies of Divine Dragonlord Felgrand and 2 copies of Archbrave Dragon. These 4 cards are the reason I've been having so much fun playing this deck recently. So when Divine Dragonlord Felgrand was first announced, I really didn't have like much hope for it, because the original Felgrand Dragon was just absolute, just like garbage. But when I read these 2 cards, I was like, wow, well, that's pretty good. So basically, when Divine Dragonlord Felgrand is special summoned from the grave, it targets a monster in your opponent's graveyard or on their field, and then just straight up banishes it. And then he gains attack and defense equal to its level or rank times 100. So this guy gets pretty beefy considering he's already 2800 base. So he's usually sitting like over 3k along your other like Blue Eyes monsters. Additionally, when he swings over something by battle, he targets another level 7 or 8 dragon in either player's graveyard and special summons it to your field. So if you're ever in like a mirror match, for some reason someone's still playing Blue Eyes, and you just want to flex on your opponent, you can summon their Blue Eyes and just kill them with it. So Felgrand is really, really good. He's the reason that this deck wants to go second, because you just want to summon him from the grave and banish your opponent's stuff, and just keep accumulating advantage by summoning huge dragons on the field. As for Archbrave, it just really, really irks me that this card is not a level 8 and is a level 7, but if it were a level 7, I think this deck would have been a bit too good when it came out, because getting this into the graveyard off of trade-in would just be really, really free. So the next standby phase after Archbrave is sent to the graveyard, it targets another level 7 or 8 dragon in your grave and special summons it. Additionally, when Archbrave is special summoned from the graveyard, it just banishes all of your opponent's face-up back row, and then he gains 200 attack and defense for each card banished by that effect. So that's really, really good, especially against like Floodgate decks and Pendulum decks. Summon Archbrave first to just wipe their back row. So the idea here is that you want to be looping Felgrand and Archbrave So ideally you want to have these two in the grave at the same time. Archbrave will summon Felgrand. Felgrand will banish something, swing over something, and then summon Archbrave, and then Archbrave will nuke the back row, and then you just continue from there. If you wanted to, you could play Omega in the extra deck, because this is a 7 and all your tuners are 1s. So you could run Omega just to put back your banished eggs, and that way, that's another way to put Archbrave into the graveyard to keep abusing his effect. But both of these cards can revive any of your big dragons, so that's really, really good. They can summon Alternative as well, but Alternative must have first been summoned properly using its own effect by revealing Blue Eyes in hand. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, these 4 cards are the reason this deck wants to go second, and the reason why I've just been loving this deck so far. It's a nice change up from just playing like standard pure Blue Eyes, like sit on Spirit Dragon, or make VFD if you're playing that variant. But yep, those are your big dragons. Let's move on to the little guys. 3 copies of Sage with Eyes of Blue. You're not playing Blue Eyes correctly if you're not playing 3 of this card. But use the Stratosphere deck. You'll search any level 1 light tuner to your hand on summon. Although you don't really use that effect all that often because you want to go second with this deck. So you usually use his effect to pitch himself from the hand to target another effect monster on your field, send that card to the graveyard, and then just tutor Blue Eyes from your deck because you want to put like bigger monsters on board for more damage. So ideally, you would be summoning like one of these guys, and then pitching Sage, sending the egg, and then tutoring Blue Eyes, and then in the end phase, this would float into another Blue Eyes. So that way you can get 2 dragons on board. Or worst case, you can if you open multiples, you can summon one, search something, and then use the second one to tutor the Blue Eyes that way. But yeah, triple Sage, triple White Stone of Ancients. This card's really, really good. If this card goes to the graveyard during that end phase, you just summon a Blue Eyes monster from your deck. That's not a once per turn effect either, so if multiple copies of this card go to the grave, a lot of dragons are going to be hitting the field. Its other effect, though, where it banishes itself to add a Blue Eyes monster in your graveyard back to your hand, is a hard once per turn effect. So that's just a good way to recycle cards. Like, if you need to get, like, an alternative out of your hand, or if you have, like, an alternative in your graveyard and a vanilla Blue Eyes in hand, you can banish this, add back whatever piece you're missing, and then just keep going with your plays. So triple that, and then we just play 1 copy of White Stone of Legend and 1 copy of Master with Eyes of Blue. It's really standard. Master's good. He helps you get stuff back out of your graveyard, and he can also extend plays by shuffling himself back into the deck from the grave, and then speccing another big dragon from your graveyard. If you send a card on your field to the graveyard, or send an effect monster on your field to the graveyard, so it's a little bit of a neg, but he can be really good at extending. You could cut this card completely if you wanted to. This list is 41 cards, because we are playing Desires. And I know I'm being kind of hypocritical by only playing one-ofs of these when I literally just said I hate banishing one-ofs off of Desires, but if you banish these, it's really not the end of the world. Because you don't really go into the synchros that much anyway. So that's it for the monsters. It's all just really standard Blue Eyes stuff, just except for these 4. So, yep. Onto the spells. 3 copies of Melody of Awakening Dragon. This card basically says pitch a card and summon alternative, and then pop a card. Getting this card Ash just sucks though, because you just neg, but you know, hopefully you're playing a fun duel with friends and your guys aren't like running like a ton of hand traps. You could play Gammas in this deck if you wanted to, just because it wants to go second, if you wanted to try and make this deck somewhat more competitively viable, but I digress. This card's really good. A lot of the times what I find myself doing is searching out the White Stone of Legend to pitch for Melody's cost, because Alternative Dragon is honestly just dead in your deck because it's only searchable off of Melody, and dead drawing Alternative later on in the game is a lot worse than just dead drawing Blue Eyes White Dragon, and you want to keep these guys in your deck as long as possible to tutor off of the eggs. So I know, like, it's really standard to use Melody to go search one Blue Eyes, search one alternative, but if I can, I always like to just pitch the stone and then search, or get the stone into the graveyard somehow using, like, Dragon Shrine or whatever, Foolish Burial. And then just searching 2 copies of alternative. That way you can deck thin and make your deck a bit more consistent. Just because this card's not really live unless you have a Blue Eyes in hand, and this card will get you a free Blue Eyes because it's a mandatory effect. So, yep, triple Melody, really standard. Now for the revival spells, the bread and butter of the deck, 3 copies of Return of the Dragon Lords. This card is absolutely just broke. It's not once per turn. It just summons huge dragons from your graveyard and protects them. Its protection effect isn't an activated effect. It doesn't start a new chain. It just happens. You just banish this card and your dragons are protected. So there's literally no reason not to play 3 of this card. If you're not playing 3, your list is incorrect. And then we just play one of Silver's Cry, Game Charge, and Monster Reborn. These 2 really don't need an explanation. This is just a really good going second free revival card, because if you want to, you can just take your opponent's stuff in the graveyard if they do combo off. Sack Charge it wins games. And then I'm only playing one Silver's Cry just because the goal of the deck is to abuse these 4, and Silver's Cry can't summon them because they're not normal monsters. So just the one of. If you're playing like a pure variant, I think it's better to play 2 Silver's Cry, just because you can set it, and then like during your opponent's turn you can disrupt them by flipping it up, summoning this boy, and then banishing their back row like that. So I usually like 2 Silver's Cry in pure builds, but just for the Felgrand build, just the one of's fine. So that's 6 spells and technically 4 monsters that all revive your dragons from your graveyard. So 10 cards total. That'll help you get your dragons on board. So I think that's just fine. Yep. Draw power. 3 copies of Trade-In. Super standard. You're basically all of your dragons except for Archbrave are 8s. So, and the whole point of this deck is to just load your graveyard with your dragons and just summon them and beat your opponent in the face. So play 3 of this. 2 Desires, 1 Cards of Consonance. Desires is a +1. It says draw 2. You want to see your resources as fast as possible, so you can kill your opponent quicker. And then Cards of Consonance. Cards of Consonance is another card that can be cut if you wanted to, just to make the list 40. But no, it's there. Sage can make it live if you really need to, because this deck doesn't have a normal summon. Sage is literally the only normal summon, except for Master. But Sage is a lot more valuable early on. So if you do happen to draw Sage and Cards of Consonance, you can, summon Sage, search an egg, pitch it, draw 2 more cards. So it's all good. Now for your Foolish cards, 1 copy of Foolish Burial and 2 copies of Dragon Shrine. Foolish just sends literally anything. It's just absolutely amazing. Dragon Shrine is also just really, really good in this deck. It synergizes really well with Dragon Spirit of White, because Dragon Spirit of White is treated as a normal monster in the grave, so you can send 2 dragons off of Dragon Shrine. This card sends Felgrand, it sends Archbrave, because a really huge problem this deck has, because I'm not playing Dragon Ravine, because I played that build for a while when this deck came out, and I just thought that that was really bad, because you're so susceptible to Ogre and stuff, but the hardest part of this deck is getting Archbrave and Felgrand in the graveyard, so I wanted to maximize on ways to do that. And unfortunately, Dragon Shrine is a hard once per turn. If it weren't, though, this card would be on the list in some way, shape, or form. But just the 2 of, you see this often enough, and if you draw multiples of this, it's kind of a dead card, so you just play 2, so in case you open Shrine and Burial, you can resolve both. So this loads your graveyard with your dragons. This can send your eggs if you need to. Yeah, Dragon Shrine is really, really good. And then the last 2 cards in the deck are 1 for 1 and 2 copies of Twin Twister. These are your other discard outlets along with Melody to put dragons in your graveyard, to send eggs to your graveyard, to put Archbrave in your graveyard if you're unfortunate enough to open up with it. These are your discard outlets. 1 for 1 just puts a tuner on board, just not going to complain. It's really good. And then Twin Twisters is pretty standard. You're going second, and back row is really annoying. I think Twin Twister is a lot better if played reactively, instead of just like blindly Twin Twistering into something. Because a lot of the times I see people just blind Twin Twister, and then their opponent flips Imperial Order, and then they kind of just have to scoop it up because it's Imperial Order. So, yep, that's the main deck. 41 cards. It's honestly super standard Blue Eyes stuff. I actually think, like, aside from like Master and like the one Silver's Cry, and then like these four, like this deck is literally just a Blue Eyes deck. But make any changes you want in your list if you decide to play this deck. Onto the extra deck. The extra deck's also just like super free as well. We play 2 copies of Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. It comes up sometimes. It's a really good boss monster. It negates grave effects, and it basically makes Pendulum Summoning its bitch. So this card's really good. I only play 1 copy of Azure Eyes. This is another revival card, and it offers protection. It's a target off of Spirit Dragon as well, so really good. I'm still playing Crystal Wing for some reason, just because I couldn't be bothered to like remove it from the extra deck. But you can still make this. It's a bit harder because Ancient Fairy Dragon is now banned, but this card can still come up. And I just think this card's really good. And this is a fun deck, so I wanted to play fun cards. If you wanted to, you could like meme and like cut this for like a Blue Eyes Twin Burst Dragon if you wanted to. I did that for a little bit just to like, you know, mess around. But this could probably be literally anything you wanted. For the other Spirit Dragon targets, I just play a Moonlight Dragon and a Starter Spark Dragon. This just helps you out problematic things if they can't be destroyed, and this just protects things. So these cards are both really strong on their own as well. Although you could probably cut one, because honestly you don't really... In this deck you really only make rank 8s. I really don't think the Synchros are as powerful because you're not going first. So Spirit Dragon and Azure Eyes don't really do all that much. The rank 8s are a lot better at breaking boards, but yeah, it's still really standard. So for the Xyz, 1 copy of Hope Harbinger and 1 copy of the newest addition to the rank 8 pool, number 90 Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord. These are really good if somehow your opponent like decides you want to go first. But yeah, this guy's really good as well. I highly advise you to pick him up, just to play in any rank 8 deck. And then we play 1 copy of Divine Dragon Knight Felgrand, really standard in rank 8s as well. And then the Galaxy Suite, Cypher Dragon, Full Armor Photon, and Cypher Blade. You're going second, and this package helps you just bust boards wide open. And then they're all just huge as well. Yeah, so that's just a lot of damage going straight for your opponent's face. And then the last Xyz we play are 1 copy of Lancelot and 1 copy of Sanafon the Sky Prison. Lancelot's just there to like hit your opponent in the face for 2k and then pop a card. And then Sanafon comes up if you're ever playing a mirror match, or if you're ever playing a game where your opponent likes to abuse the graveyard summoning mechanic just like you do. Go first, establish a Sanafon, and then your opponent will have a really hard time. And Sanafon will also get like really huge because it'll just gain attack and defense. But this could literally be like anything else. These 2 cards, the last 3 cards, the Underclock Taker, which is the only Link we play, could literally be anything. This would probably be a Link Kribo, but Link Kribo is in my Goki deck, and I couldn't be bothered to switch it out. But Underclock Taker is also really good too. The attack reduction comes up a lot to just punch your opponent for game through their monsters, and then to finish them off with your other beaters. But yeah, these 3, the entire extra deck is basically just like free. I just play a bunch of rank 8s. I highly recommend the Galaxy package, and then like these 2. And then like obligatory, just for like the theme, play like the Spirit Dragon and the Azure Eyes. And then the 1 copy of Flying Fish. So that's the deck. 41 cards. It's really, really fun. I highly advise or recommend you guys try it out. If not in real life, then online, just to like have a bit of fun. Just be really sacky and annoy people with Felgrand's banishing effect. Yeah. Like, comment, share, flag is inappropriate, do whatever.